And we are live.
Sweet. All right. Hello, family. I'm sure people are coming into the chat. I wonder, is there a way to, are we all big on the screen? Everybody looking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we in threes.
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, shoot, let's pop this thing off as people are coming in here. Um, if you are joining us when you hop in, we could just run through intros real quick. My name is Mariah. Um, I come from the Kepler space. Happy to be here. And I have two wonderful individuals also with me from Kepler. And I'm gonna let them introduce themselves as well. And then we'll hop into it.
I Diapedisa, been with Kepler for a while. Glad to be here to talk about social capital and listen and learn.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Albany Hart from the Kepler Institute as well. Really honored to be here. Um, ready to dive in?
Sweet. Hello, Shannon. If you do come in here, please feel free to drop a comment. Let us know you're here, so we can show you some love, and say, hey, how you doing? All that good stuff. We want to know that you are present with us. So please drop a comment. Say what's up. Um, cool. So I think it would be great for us to give a little bit more of an extensive intro. How'd you come into Kepra? Now, I mean, Diop is from the beginning. So maybe if we start with you and you can kind of give us a quick origin story about KI for those who are joining us and who don't know much about Kepra, and then we'll go to Albany and I.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, Kepler Institute was created back in 2003, and it was primarily a response from my parents to assist me with some of my rebellious academic activities. And they wanted to create an environment where I could learn and grow, but not in isolation to my peers. So it was summer in 2003 where they began to put together some formal academic enrichment experiences as well as entrepreneurship experiences, and invited friends from my neighborhood and my family to participate. And it just started to grow and grow over the years, to take a very intentional approach to community development around youth, but tied to intergenerational approach. So we're a nonprofit 501c3. And over the years, we've spent a lot of time focusing on youth leadership development and trying to equip young people with a skill set to, they feel they can go out and solve problems in their communities, but also create desirable futures with the skill sets that they have, the resources they have, and on the terms that they want to see come into being. And heavy around environmental aspects in terms of air quality, food, things of that nature. Like I said, heavy around cooperative economics, entrepreneurship as a tool to problem solving and funding alternative solutions. Heavy around education, community education. We ran a school for a few years. So just a lot of different components that have gone into creating a system that we believe is great for self determination and self reliance. And that's really the skinny. And so yeah, but I can definitely answer more questions throughout the presentation.
Absolutely. Anybody who's joining us, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. Yeah, we can chat. Anything, if you have any comments, any thoughts, definitely get active. Get active with us. Albany?
Yes. So I am in Kepra in a few different spaces. Um, I came to Kepra actually through Mariah Ivy here. She kind of just brought me into the fold. Literally sat on this lawn with M and Miss Fair and Miss Pompana came by, and we just kind of talked. We had another friend join us. We just had an open dialogue about who I am, who kind of a lot of the things that Diop touched on. What am I interested in? Where do my skills lie, and how do I feel like I can best use those skills? Where do I feel like is my best to push forth a lot of the goals that we have to blow through the goals that we have for uplifting and making sure that our community is set and cool, whether that is the KI community or the greater community that KI serves. Um, and so since then, I've just kind of dabbled in a few things to figure out where is that. I think one of the cool things that I love about KI is that it's okay to try new things and it's absolutely okay to fail. It's absolutely okay to learn that this is not actually where I should be, where I best am serving again the KI or the greater community. So being here has taught me a lot about being okay with being uncomfortable, whatever that uncomfortability looks like, whether uncomfortable with failure, uncomfortable with honestly with success. Like sometimes you're uncomfortable because you know that you're gonna do well. That's a whole thing. Just kind of like navigating those spaces and having support from a community that wants to see you grow and wants to see you in the best position possible. So being here has been eye opening and uplifting in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think like, we're here to talk about social capital, and I think, social capital, there are plenty of examples all through our stories, just how we all came into the space. For myself, I too, so I don't know, let me think. 2015, I think it was. Um, and I honestly can't remember if I first came to Kepler through just like by email, or Diop, if you and I knew each other prior to and we talked. Do you remember? Did I know you prior to
Uh,
or after I came to? I don't know.
I think it was like almost simultaneously from the art
Yeah.
world and the
Mhm.
nonprofit world.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I wanted to do some more work with youth, specifically around poetry and performance. And so for those who don't know, I'm a poet, spoken word artist, and musician. And so I do a lot on the art scene. And so I wanted to create an avenue for young people to come and get some workshop skills and in performance and learn more about the craft. But I needed some assistance with that. But I too wanted to get involved with an organization that was aligned with all the other things that I'm passionate about and was already kind of doing. So I believe I came to meet with Imhotep Adisa. Um, and when I came in to meet with him, we ended up meeting with like 10 other people who were in Kepler space. Now, for those who are not used to this kind of culture, that in itself already uh it can be off-putting, right? um there are so many of us who are used to this culture where everything is kind of like private, right? Let's go have a meeting with just you and I, in an office, door shut, nobody knows what we're talking about, right? That is kind of like the norm. So when I came in thinking I was going to have a meeting, honestly, coming out of that kind of culture, traditional corporate America world, I thought I was going to have just a one-on-one, and ended up having like 10 people. We're all sitting in a circle and everybody's just asking questions. So I was just like, okay. I don't know, so I'm just here kind of uncomfortable, but it was really, really good because that was the beginning of a whole entire mindset shift for me. That was the beginning of a philosophy change for me. And I think when you come into Kepra, that is what happens. And that's a whole story on its own, that we could get into. But through those conversations, I was able to learn about everybody. I was able to learn about, everyone's philosophy, how they move through the world, what they're passionate about, what draws them to the work, what keeps them in the work. whereas, I might have come in thinking, okay, how do I start? When do I start? What's I wanted all of this structure. But sometimes when you're building community, there is not a lot of structure, and it's really based upon who comes into the work and what you're bringing to it. And so that's what I enjoyed about Kepra, is that when I got there, the question was, what do you want to do and how can we support you? And that's not a question you often get. Sometimes you come into places and they have a need that needs to be fulfilled. So the question is, can you fulfill this need versus what do you do? What are your strengths and how can we support you? And so from that, we did I don't know how many weeks it was, maybe like a 6-week poetry performance. Program over the summer for camp, and KI supported that, provided me with the materials, the resources to do it, and it was really, really dope. And so KI's just kind of been family ever since. So yeah, so that's kind of how we all got here. I know, long stories, but those origin stories are important,
Yeah.
because you meet people, and then when you meet those people, they put you on a path to meet other great people, and that's how the work continues. So that's great. I see some questions. Are you guys seeing the comments? Want to make sure.
Definitely.
All right. So does this process help you narrow and strengthen your individual passion? Absolutely. Um, this process has helped me think about how I'm building, with community. I think when we think about buzzwords, I think community is a buzzword. I think building community is a phrase that is often used, but sometimes you don't really step back to think about what does it mean to actually build community. What does it mean to actually do life with a person, to walk with a person, to create with a person in a way that is not transactional, that is not based on you have this service or you have this skill and this is what we're doing. No, we're actually walking with each other, so that we can learn how to survive with one another, right, in tandem. And so this process helped me to learn that, right? It helped me to figure out how to lean on other people and not just my own strengths, because that's not, it's not possible. You need people, you need folks. So yeah, it's definitely taught me a lot. So yeah, on that tip, we are here to talk about social capital, the power of relationships and things of that nature. So I want to pass it back to Diop to kind of give us a good working definition. And if you guys have any thoughts about social capital, please feel free to drop a comment or a phrase that comes to mind when you think of social capital. Drop it in the comments. Yeah. So pass to you.
Got you. So, yeah, a lot of times when we're using the word social capital or the term, the phrase, it's basically referring to the breadth and depth of your relationship. So, and it can be in any context. It can be family, it can be professional, personal. Just taking an assessment of, these are the relationships I have. Some of them will be, deeper than others. Some of them may be very spread out, but just the breadth and depth of those relationships. Now, how in which social capital impacts your life is a different conversation. Some people are very intentional about nurturing relationships. Some people have the skill set and the knowledge and the security to nurture a lot of relationships. Others, receive what they receive from the environment, and that impacts, whether positively or negatively, their social capital. But when you think about opportunity or experiences, generally most of those things emerge out of the development and sustainment of relationships. So getting people to realize that those connections are a resource uh, to utilize. But for us, we don't operate our social capital in a transactional way. So I don't, go out and say, all right, I'm a develop a relationship with someone just so I can get something done. Because we live in a world that's very transactional already, and we can already see some of the ways in which it is negatively impacting um, a lot of different states of being, whether it be physical, metaphysical, spiritual, emotional, intellectual. So our main thing is, the most important thing is the connection, not what the connection can do for you. Because there's no such thing as being divorced from the collective. Nothing grows in isolation. Nothing in nature that I've ever seen. So if you can find that out, you show me. And I would like to study it and see if I can prove that that's wrong. But nevertheless, we just really primarily about what are people trying to do for themselves and their community, and how can we support that, how can we build shared vision. And there'll be different levels of depth to which you can do that, because you can't go in with every relationship. But if you start there, what is this person's story, what is their why, what is this group of people's story, what is their why, and how does it interact with my story, my aspirations, my philosophy. And then you can then create real conversation, real connection. And then that relationship will then dictate what types of transactions or what types of tangible products and experiences come out of those connections. So we put that at the back end, not on the front end. And I think that's one different paradigm shift from what is traditionally seen as, all right, I need this, let me call this person up and do. And it's okay to identify a need, but when you go and interact with that person, you should at least be aware in your mind of, who is this person? Where are they coming from? Why are they doing this? Things of that nature, because then that helps actually have a meaningful and fruitful connection. So that's kind of what I'll just give a skinny on what we mean by social capital.
Yeah. Albany, did you have anything to add to that when you think of social capital? Any particular things come to mind or strong examples that you want to point out?
Honestly, the main thing, and someone in the comments actually said it, was that it's an authentic relationship. It's a genuine relationship. It's not one, as Diop described, that is steep. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? But it's more so like, um, how am I? How are you? Like where are you? How am I? Where am I? And just kind of like, in some respects, being a friend to someone, a genuine friend, um and then you are like working friends in a sense. I think an example um that I have would honestly be a friend that I have named Michaela. She and I started off as just getting to know one another when I was in BSU at Butler University, and we just kind of hit it off. We worked side by side together um, through BSU, but in that we kind of got to know each other as people, and learned each other. And when she was going through what she was going through, I was able to kind of pick up where she needed some additional help, and likewise. And while we were working in a sense with BSU, we got to know each other in ways that I don't think a lot of people really do. I like upon graduating and having a chance to step out into other work environments, I don't necessarily get that same vibe from people. When I'm sending an email to someone, I'm not gonna first check up on them. It's like, well, this is what I need. So what's up? I didn't have we didn't set that type of community at BSU. We wanted to make sure that everybody, and not just us, but everybody we were working with, felt like they were family, because we were trying to cultivate environments around family. So how we operated with one another was a direct influence. It directly informed how we were going to operate with everyone else. And so that was just one way that I feel like social capital um, is cultivated and then starts to like permeate and diffuse into other environments and situations.
Hmm. Just to add to that, I think it's been beautiful to see what has also come from that relationship alone. Um, from there, you brought Michaela into another space that we are in. So Albany and I run an open mic called That Piece Open Mic, local performing arts space hub here in the city. And Albany brought Michaela into that piece
Mhm.
as a graphic designer. And so through that, Michaela has been able to hone her skill and hone her craft, but also come into a new circle of friends. And that circle of friends turned into like a tight sisterhood, right?
Yeah.
And from that, we've been able to connect her to other people who are, hey, there's an organization over here who's looking for a graphic designer as well. Now we're able to say, hey, there's somebody in our circle who's not only great at this service, but is an awesome person, and y'all should meet them. So now they have not only a working relationship, but an actual relationship with one another. And so we've seen how all of these things begin to connect by nature of building relationships. And I think that's the dopest part of it all, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you guys speak to why is it important for us to care about relationships, right? And it not being transactional. Why is it so important to nurture a relationship or to even evaluate the breadth and the depth of your relationship at all?
I think that goes to um, kind of not looking at people as like things, but looking at people as people. Um, when I've experienced some transactional relationships, and when one thing goes wrong or one thing isn't the way that it's supposed to be, then it's done. Like the connection is severed. Nobody's reaching out to me. Nobody's talking to me. Nobody is following up with me. Um, at all. It's just kind of like you were in this position. Now you're not by like, and we don't really care what happens to you after this because you are no longer serving the company, serving the outcome, serving the product. Instead, um, I think that when you put emphasis on the relationship on the person, um, and not on the outcome or the product, then you are actually giving yourself an opportunity to create a better outcome and a better product because you're putting that person in the best position possible for them to best serve whatever it could be. And if they are in the best position and they are serving their best, then you are going to get the best outcome. You're going to get the best product. And I mean, and I use that example as like outcome driven, but it's not the process, the foundation, what it's centered in is the person, is making sure that the person is okay. What happens if I messed up, but I messed up or I slacked because something was going on, but we don't have a relationship, so you don't even feel comfortable asking me like, hey, how are you? Is everything okay? Instead, you're messing up. You are ruining our chances of success. And when you're putting the product above a person, then they begin to feel like, well, do I even matter? And I feel like as people, we have to start learning how to put people first because people matter, especially in community, because what we are doing is literally for the people. Um, so it's extremely important that we cultivate and care about the relationship and nurture the relationship first and foremost, making that our number one priority instead of making the outcome our number one priority.
Mhm.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is that, I believe that relationship is really just about how we relate and not just to each other, but in, all things in existence. So I think the journey for us and a lot of beings is to get clear on how we connect to each other and all things taking place. And I think the reason that's the journey is because the better you can see connection, because we feel connection out the gate. Like if somebody is upset, they may not say a word, but you start to feel how they feel, and you trying to assess, well, is this me feeling this way?
Mhm.
And if you feel connected to that person, then a lot of times you'll be vulnerable enough to, hey, ask them what's going on, because once you ask them, then it becomes a portal between you two to really dig into each other. But if you can see connection, then you can act out of love, And I think if you can act out of love, then you can project forth positivity through your energy and through your movement, through your communications, and all of the ways in which we project forth energy. So I think that's what's most important, is trying to get people to recenter themselves towards love and connectivity, and not blind love, and not, not, because a lot of times people think if you talk about love, it's absent of accountability. But actually, sometimes that is exactly what it is, um, and being able to help each other. So I think the more we can do that, the more we can create a world that is more focused on the interconnectivity that exists amongst all things, and how to create systems and ways of being that protect that, and then project forth positivity and reciprocal ways of being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
And relationships are needed in order for accountability um, to happen in a way that is reciprocal and receptive, for the person to actually receive it. Sometimes it requires relationships. I think for me, working with youth is a prime example of that, right? So you have a lot of teachers or youth workers who work with young people but do not have relationships with them. And because of that, someone is less likely to hear what you have to say where that relationship is not present. They have, sometimes we come into situations with preconceived notions. We don't know if we can trust you. There's so many questions, right? But if we're
Mm-hmm.
able to build a relationship, and now I see that you actually care, and you're coming from a place of love, and you're coming from a place of genuine concern, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
um, so I think that that totally changes it. I wanted to add, I want to actually tell a quick story about pretty much what you said in terms of relationships, pushing forth the opportunity, to extend grace and love and positivity, but also there's healing in that, right? So how do we get our community to a place where our community is genuinely more healed and more whole, and healthy, right? Like well communities. And in order to get to a healthy community, that requires genuine communication, that requires hard conversations, that requires removing our egos, that requires removing our facades, that requires us to be vulnerable to some degree. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you share every piece of yourself, right? But that does require you to show up and say, hey, I'm here to do the work with you. Um, I remember as an artist, I really struggled with this idea of transparency, right? So I struggle with this whole concept of like showing more of myself beyond my art. That's all that I wanted to show, right? I'm gonna come here and perform. That's it. That's all. I've always been a very private person, a person who's, I'm a homebody. I'm very closed off. I have my close circle of friends. Like that's always been me. However, sometimes when we don't do life with other people, we struggle to say, hey, I need some help. We
Yeah.
struggle to reach out when we need it. And so we're suffering in silence, right? And so I remember, you know, as a person who is like, for the most part, pretty positive, pretty happy, pretty upbeat, right? Everybody thinks like, hey, Mariah's good. She's good. So it was in those moments where I wasn't good and didn't know how to reach out because I hadn't done it. I hadn't allowed myself to be open and in relationship with people in a very authentic way. So I remember being in that place and scrolling through my contacts thinking like there is not one person in here that I even feel comfortable sharing myself with, because if I do, what if I distort this image that they have of me? What if,
Mm.
it was all those conflicting thoughts. And it took me through a phase of like, okay, let me first be honest and real with myself, right? Because at the end of the day, sometimes we're afraid to show ourselves because we don't want anybody to use whatever it is we're going through against us, right? But nobody can hold you hostage to a truth that you are already comfortable with, right? That you are already honest with yourself about. And so it took me through this process of like true liberation, like emotionally. And when I got to that place and I began to practice vulnerability through my art form, that's when other people were like, yo, you're going through that? Because I am too. And
Yeah.
I'm like, man, not only is that like the power of art, but that is the power of transparency, right? You make it okay once you say, hey, I got laid off of my job today. Now, somebody else who may not feel as courageous is able to say, I did too. That happened to me as well. And now we're able to start sharing truths. And really, all that it requires is a level of transparency. Most people are experiencing what you are. They just waiting on somebody to start talking about it. You know what I mean? Like most people are going through what you are, have gone through it, feel the same things that you are, but they are waiting for someone to open the door and express it. And the only way we can do that and get to the depth of those relationships is by removing these facades and these egos and taking ourselves off pedestals to allow other people to take us off pedestals. Don't put me on a pedestal, please. Please don't. I'm a fail. I'm human. But I think if we're honest about that, now we can do life together. We can walk through these things together. You can give me constructive criticism. You can love on me in different ways. Like it's just a process of building relationships and a level that we have to allow ourselves to get to in order for those relationships to to hold weight, to be strong enough to weather storms, right? And we need that because nothing grows in isolation, like you said, nothing at all. So,
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a story in history of back in like the 50s and 60s. A lot of particularly black homeowners were being sold contracts, and it took one person to remove her facade in order for them to collectively come together to begin to fight against the injustice of being sold a home, but really it being sold on contract. And I think that's just a good historical example of how social capital, of how relationships, of how deciding to be vulnerable allows for that allows for an opportunity for not just you to be given something better, but for the community to be given access to something that's going to help advance them. Through that, they were able to combat the contracts, um, and the negativity around that, and how it was negatively impacting homeowners because they weren't technically considered homeowners of the time. So that really reminded me of how of the, again a historical example of the necessity of us to be able to be vulnerable and trust one another, and build and cultivate that relationship, not just again for ourselves, but for one another.
mhm,
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to add about social capital as it relates to people of color, people without perceived scarce resourced communities, and how it relates to institution building. So a lot of times when people of color are trying to get something done, whether that's a business model or a project or a program, the ways in which the dominant culture dictate how you should move forward has people focusing on what they do not have. But what you always have is relationships and the potential to create relationships. And that means that you always have the potential to build shared vision. So organizations, institutions are just a collection of connections that have agreed on a shared vision and have decided to make a commitment on how to bring that into being. So if people of color have institutions, if they have organizations, then they have the potential to bring whatever desired future state they want into being, even in the midst of perceived scarcity. And I say proceed because I think if you have relationships, you have the infinite
mhm,
potential of abundance.
mhm,
And it doesn't matter where you are, it just requires a vantage point to see that, and then having the courage to take that independent walk, because it's an independent walk in terms of the dominant narrative, the dominant way of being. But you won't be independent because there'll be a lot of people who support, who get it, who love it, and will be willing to put their pitchfork in the dirt right next to yours. And I believe Mimi had a question about how do people in traditional spaces use social capital approaches. I would just say that the simplest thing to do is when you start to interact with people, focus on learning their story. People
Mhm.
love to tell their story. They love to feel heard. And then people should practice listening those stories, practice trying to support the stories that are shared with them. And if you just get in the habit of doing that in all of the spaces you're in, it'll become second nature. It won't even be something that's foreign. And it won't matter what the dominant culture is of the space you're in, because you'll be able to have the awareness to move with that different cornerstone.
Mhm. I agree. Did you have anything to add to that answer, Albany, or question?
I don't think I could have said it any better. I was just going to
Yeah.
take the time to really get to know the person, and in order to do
Hmm.
that, to know their story.
Yep. Yep. Got to start there. I realize that, I mean, I think you said this already. People enjoy talking about themselves, right? By nature. And that's okay. I think that's awesome. We need to create more space for people to share their stories, to share who they are, because we are so used to interacting with folks in traditional corporate spaces. As it relates to what they can do, what they can offer versus who they are and how they got here and how the interest was sparked. And, all of those things will help to create a well rounded view of a person. And really, it's just about conversation, right? I know in traditional corporate spaces, we often work in our silos. We're not often forced to be collaborative. So collaboration is a foreign idea to many people. But I would challenge folks to figure out how you can become more collaborative. Is there something you are working on or something you're even thinking about? I would challenge you to ask somebody what their thoughts are on it, because now you're opening it up to collective thought and vision, right? You're having conversation with people who can offer different perspective, and that's necessary. That's super necessary. So take it, something extremely small. Ask somebody what they think about it. Ask a few people what they think about it. If you're reading a book, hey, y'all should read this book with me. Let's build about it. That's beautiful all on its own. There's small things you can do, but certainly starting with getting to know somebody's story is pretty awesome. We have some more questions. How long do you think this process will take for someone to get to the first level of opening up to this process?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So it one depends on the person and the journey they're at with one looking at the mirror in the mirror at some of the scripts and the trauma that they've inherited. So I think that's one piece. And I think the other piece is, do they have community that is supportive to allow them to continue to become vulnerable and open up and transform themselves? So there's not necessarily a specific time when someone gets to that stage, and it's not a guarantee that they will get to that stage. But I think it's twofold. It's one, getting to that place personally, and then finding the community or utilizing the community that you already have to hold you and help you get to that next place, is what I would say.
Mhm.
Yeah, not too much to add, but to just continue to again, there is no guarantee, but to help, I think just continuing to make sure that they have the room and the space, and they know that they can take up that room and that space whenever it is that they are ready to cross that threshold. Um, but there is no like one size fits all. There's no like direct path, hang a right at the next light. Like there's none of that. You kind of just have to walk with that person wherever that they're going. And if that's, up the block and back, then that's that. But if you guys are taking a long walk through the park, then just allowing yourself to go on that journey, um, and, and
Mhm.
and being comfortable with it.
Yeah, yeah. I would add that, um, man, again, it looks different for everyone, but I think when you get to the place where you realize there is more than enough room for everybody, then you become more open to collaboration. You become more open to building with folks and perhaps opening up or sharing ideas. I think oftentimes from my experience, um, a lot of folks believe that there can only be one. There can only be one of us at the table. There can only be one of us who gets this, whatever it is, grant. There can only be one popular thing, right? And so, because of that, it forces us to be closed off. It forces us to withhold um, whatever it is we can offer because we want to be that one. And so, I think sometimes getting out of your own way and saying, hey, we can get a lot further with more. Um, we can get a lot further with other ideas and other perspective. Then we begin to open up a little bit more to other people. So I would say honestly, it is an independent journey of one being comfortable and getting comfortable with self and what it is that you offer and what it is you are able to bring to the table and who it is you are. Um, Understanding that there is so much power and beauty in your own self to be able to say, hey, there's enough for all of us. You know, now let me take this walk with other people. Let's build together because I don't have it all. So, you know, I think, yeah, I think that's a great first step. Um, but I can't speak to how long it might take. It could take a while, you know, it could take a while, but showing up every single day and continuing to try, showing up for yourself every single day and saying, hey, I'm gonna try this in very small ways, right? That's how you get there, you know, and then connecting with people or organizations that will push you out of your comfort zone, right? For me, Kepra pushed me out of my comfort zone. Where I'm at now, and while I'm still growing and still learning daily, I wasn't in 2015 or 2016 or 27. You know, it goes on. Like it's constant growth. But if you're not connected to people who will push you out of your comfort zone, who will call you on your stuff, who will hold you accountable, but also know that it comes from love, you know, it comes out of love, then you it might take you longer, you know. So I would challenge you to do that, to do that. Let's see. We have another question. How do we move away from the all too common deficit mindset institutions often hold when talking about communities, particularly communities of color?
Yeah, I think the best way for that to change is that the communities of color are part of the institutions. So you have to remove the separation so that it is not a vantage point as if we're looking outward at something, and instead of we're it's an expression of self when we look at it. So I think that's one piece. But for communities of color, I would say for them I would not concern myself with the way in which others may view our community as being without or not having, because trying to impact that perception, we have less control over that. We have more control about the perceptions we hold and the activities we are creating to act on those perceptions.
Mhm.
We're just gonna bring it back to social capital. Um, you really don't know until you form a relationship with members of the community and you actually go in and you actually talk to people and you decide that you aren't going to go in with your preconceived notions, but go in wanting to just bringing it full circle, like get to know that person's story, get to know that community's story. Um, you'll always have what the outsiders are saying, but until you decide to make yourself an insider, until you're intentional about it, you'll never really know what the truth is.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, prioritizing uh, relationships and people is not only, I think, a mindset shift from what the dominant culture pushes, but it will also never have you feeling like you're without, you know? And I think that is a constant. thing that you have to resist and push back against. Because I think, especially for communities of color, particularly Black communities, the dominant narrative will say, hey, you guys don't own anything, you guys don't have this or have that, right? But I think when you look at what you do have, right? Because this perceived scarcity, right, is sometimes what brings folks together. But when folks come together, out of that comes abundance, flows abundance. So it's like, hey, we're really not without, because someone over here does this and someone over there does that, and collectively we do this. So I think it's when you begin to prioritize those relationships, you really don't, come from this. You really don't have that deficit mindset, that scarcity mindset. It's really a shift. But I also think it requires you to align yourselves with people who share this similar philosophy. Um, so yeah. Next question is, what is your greatest challenge? I'm assuming this is greatest challenge as it pertains to social capital or building relationships. I don't know. I'm gonna let y'all take that how you want to.
I did take it as what is my greatest challenge when building relationships or increasing social capital, and I think that I am my greatest challenge. Um, I think it goes back to like how comfortable you are, how far you are willing to walk, and how many times a day, or how frequently you are willing to walk with someone. Um, how when it comes to like the breath, like how many different things do you want to cover? When it comes to the depth, how deep do you want to go? And I think that with me, like it takes me a while to want to open up and to feel comfortable feeling like that I can be there for people, and that's me. That's not like anybody else. Um, so I feel like the greatest challenge is stepping out of um, having been indoctrinated to think that I should be by myself. That self love, self care, self made, self everything. Like it's not that. Like it's really not that. Um, it takes for me to not only want to, but then to begin to implement the practices that demonstrate my desire to want to actually build relationships and to want to come out of this. I gotta get it how I get it. But to understand that when I eat, we eat, and that's okay, and that's how it should be. Because what if I don't have food, and now I don't have anybody here with me? So now, not only am I like self-made, but the girl's hungry too. So what I gotta do? I'm here hungry. So like I think it all comes down to just me and my mental, and breaking free from those chains of that are tied to this pole of individualism. Like I really need to break free from that and understand that collectivism is really where it's at. And I have to take my steps and walk my path towards getting there, and whatever that journey looks like is okay. If I do something and someone calls me out on it, then they're just letting me know, like, hey, little do you know, you still walking with that little ankle bracelet that got that big ball on it, you know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd say that my biggest challenge is breaking free from those mental models that I had kind of coming into something that was like completely different, which is
Mm,
which is true community.
mhm. Yeah, that's real. That's real.
Mhm.
Yep. What's your greatest challenge?
As it relates to this social capital conversation, I would say um, getting others to see that abundance exists right now where they're at, and it's tied to their connections and how they relate to all things in existence. And I guess the patience it requires um, for others to get there, if they get there.
Yeah, patience. Whew,
Mhm.
that's the thing. Patience and grace. Those are both things that we not only need to get to others, but we need to get to ourselves along the way as well. My greatest challenge, man. My greatest challenge, I would say, are a combination of two things. One being similar to Albany. You know, it takes for me it takes a while to build those relationships and get to a space where I too feel comfortable being open. I'm not so much of a small talk person. So, you know, for me, it's either, you know, we're talking and we're building or we're not, right? It hasn't ever really been a good in between. And then oftentimes I have led with what my spirit is telling me to do or what energy is moving me towards. So if I haven't felt the energy to have a conversation, sometimes I just haven't. But those are often times where perhaps I should. Those are people that maybe you should have a conversation with. Maybe you should begin to cultivate that relationship. So I think just getting out of my own way and being open to building with new people. Like that's really it. Just getting out of my own
Yeah.
way, not thinking so much about it because I can be in my head, you know, and just doing it. Just do it, you know. So I would say that's one of my challenges. And I think the other challenge is as you are growing through this process, there are things that you will learn about yourself um, that you got to work on. And especially when it comes to building, you know, in community. Like I think that's the beautiful part about relationships is that relationships expose things to you about yourself. And then you have the choice to work on it or not, but to always understand that your actions affect other people. And I think that is the thing. You know, it could be as simple as, for instance, say you go to a meeting every Wednesday, right? And there is one particular meeting where everybody is saying, hey, we're going to pitch in, we're going to bring food. You know, you got napkins, you got forks, you got this dish, you got that dish, right? You might have shown up without the item that you were supposed to bring. Or maybe you had something come up and you weren't able to come to the meeting, right? But you did not notify anybody. In your mind, whatever it is that you are dealing with at hand is taking precedent. It is the priority. I can't come to the meeting because I had XYZ. I understand, but also think about how you not being there or you not bringing that item affected everybody else. And I think sometimes those things are what's challenging about community because we might think it's so small. Why are y'all tripping about this? I forgot the napkins. But now we got to send somebody else to get some napkins. And now we have to put other things in place for the thing that you did not communicate about. And so I think when you're building in community, it forces you to think about how what you're doing will affect the greater. Community. I think we just lost Di. Hopefully he'll hop back on. But it forces you to think about how you're affecting the rest of folks. And so that's also a challenge too. And you might be uncomfortable because you've never had anybody, you know, hold you accountable, or you've never had anybody give you a call and say, hey, let's talk about this thing. You know, there are times when, like, if you know, if y'all know Miss Paulette Fair in Kepra, or if you guys know M in Kepra, you know, there's some times where I know if one of them are calling, you know, it might be a call where they're trying to, you know, hold me accountable. And I'm like, do I want to answer today? But it is important that that happens. And in bringing them up, it's also important that you align yourselves with intergenerational communities. Those are very important spaces where there are elders and there are young people, and you know, there's a mix of thoughts and ideals and perspectives. All of that is necessary too. So yeah, those will have to be my challenges: getting to know folks, and then, you know, being okay with understanding how your actions affect other people, and really thinking through that process. So yeah, yeah, y'all are hitting us with some questions.
Hey,
We appreciate it. Please keep them coming. I think we have some more questions in here. And I just want to shout out Mimi Zakum, who is in the comments as well. Mimi is also a part of Kepler Institute. She does some amazing work with food and all kinds of things, for sure. Okay, dominant supremacist culture definitely attempts to prevent the connection and community building of communities of color. Tell us the power by the efforts to prevent it. You have any thoughts on that?
Um, so the way that I interpreted it was um, kind of like tell us like the power that we have and the efforts to prevent it. And I just think that that comes in two different forms. That comes in communities of color awakening the power within and activating their agency to then create and be the change that they want and need to see, and whatever that looks like. For example, at Kepler Institute, when a local grocery store went under, and that was the only grocery store for the neighborhood. KI came together to basically provide the community with fresh produce options, access to milk, eggs, of seasonal vegetables, some seasonal fruits as well, and just at an affordable cost. Taking into consideration what community needed and activating and acting in that way. And I believe that that was only possible because they recognized the power that they have within to be able to give and produce for the community, not just like the self, but the community. Um, the other way that I interpreted that was then how the quote unquote dominant culture um, has to then realize that the power does not 100% lie with them either. Uh, that, that they are not all powerful. They are not like a Lord and end all be all. It's coming to terms with privilege, coming to terms with reality and truth. That we are all people and we are all pretty much on the same playing field
Mhm.
at the end of the day. So that's how I interpreted that.
Yeah. Diap, I know you dropped off for a second. We are answering the question, the dominant supremacist culture. Definitely that question. Do you see it?
Well, let me see. Um, dominant supremacist culture definitely attempts to prevent the connection and community building of communities of color. Tell us the power by the efforts to prevent it. Um, so if I, so if I think I understand, it's basically how do you continue to work in the midst of that being the dominant culture?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe you can. Well, one, if you control space, you can control the culture in that space. So, for example, me, I've been blessed to be raised in an independent institution that my people helped create. So I've never had to experience working in an institution that didn't serve my cultural or personal interests. So I think that's one critical piece because you can then create worlds, you can create narratives if you own the space as well as you are trying to become mentally free. I mean, you're spending time to educate yourself and rewrite scripts that have been sold to you, forced to on you, or that you inherited consciously or subconsciously. I think that's the most critical piece that I would say, because then you can model it, and others people can then see the tangible affirmations of what it means when you have your own independent um, space and culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with those things. I don't think I have anything else to add. Um, nope, y'all hit it. Y'all hit it on now. More questions. Ooh, that last one was really good. How do you identify relationships that are not mutually serving in building collective social capital, and how to navigate those? Do you end it or do you push on them for a change?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So I can start. Well, how to identify first? Generally, it's pretty easy for me to feel when someone may be merely self-serving or transactional. Um, I can just feel it, and it's either tied to their language, uh, it's either tied to their lack of reciprocity. So those things definitely show in the dance of building a relationship. For me, I don't elect to end it initially because
Mhm.
the goal is to get people to change their vibration. And if you end it, then one, you're not being true to your own value of honoring connectivity. No one said it would be easy or straightforward. So that's one piece. And also by ending it, you yank the opportunity for transformation to potentially happen. So I definitely try to engage in a lot of different relationships with knowing that these people are coming to me and interacting with me in ways in which that they've learned. These are learned behaviors. So it's easier to keep trying to find ways in which to shift culture when you don't personalize the way in which people interact with you. And I think that is critical because once you personalize it, it becomes extremely difficult to try to help culture transform. So that's one. But yeah, it's also tied to eventually, and everyone has a different threshold, but you have to at some point make an assessment. Has this person, this individual, or these group of people made any type of investments or strides to change the way in which they interact with me and the world? And if that's no, then you have to decide how much, if any, energy do they get from you, because you only have a finite amount of energy to expand, every day. So that's kind of how I would say, but it definitely is it's an assessment, and it'll be different for different people. I know some people I work with, they got a very, very wide range where they'll walk with people for decades. And I got other people like, hey man, the clock didn't ran out. I'll catch you later. So it's definitely different for the individual. But primarily you should try to make a commitment to allow some wiggle room for development.
Mhm. I agree with that 100%. I think definitely try, before you walk away from it. I think in trying and in getting to know their story, some of the behavior begins to make sense as well. And we only get to the root of that by continuing to ask questions and continuing to engage them. We learn so much about a person. And when we're able to learn those things and we're able to make those connections, now we can understand how to best approach them, how to best walk with them, how to, communicate with them in a way where they are receptive. And I mean, like Diop said, that space for grace and patience and understanding is different for each person. But I would definitely say try first. Um, yeah, engage where they're at. Albany, did you have anything to add?
I don't think so. I think both y'all had lots of things, lots of great things to say. I think the one thing actually I did want to add is when you are, or when you're thinking about whether or not you want to try, don't make assumptions. Don't assume that they're not going to. Don't assume that they are going to grow, learn, adapt. Just kind of assess it for what it is and where that this person is at. Don't assume.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard two of the four agreements we just dropped right there.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And let me just say this, building community with folks is not always easy. I just have to put it out there because I know sometimes it's packaged in a way that sounds really, really good on the surface and like it's a walk in the park. And it's not, building relationships with folks can be frustrating. It can be irritating. It can be draining. It can be you'll be ready to cut somebody off. You like, I don't know. I don't know if I have it in me. I don't think I can do it. But because you are building these deeper relationships and you want to get to a place where you're able to walk with each other, you're saying, hey, I'm going to still show up though. I'm gonna still have that conversation, even though I don't want to. Maybe I need to take a day or two, but I'm gonna come back, and we're gonna keep trying. So I just want to put that out there. If you never get upset, I would argue that you guys haven't gotten beneath the surface yet.
Yeah, you
You
too calm.
know? Yep. Yep. So I know we have maybe 10 more minutes. I want to get to these other questions. So I'm going to read. So, how do you engage with conflict and disagreement and relationship building? Um, and then Mimi had, and then share how folks can get engaged with Kepra and the things we have going on in the works. Yeah, so let's start with that. How do you, I know we kind of touched on it, but how do you engage with conflict and disagreement in relationship building? You fight. I'm just playing. Don't fight. You say, meet me outside. We're going to figure it out. And then we're going to hug it out. What do you guys think?
We talk. You address it. Preferably within 24. When I was applying for this job once, at this school, a gentleman who was interviewing me said that I have a policy. If you have an issue, you address it within 24, and if not, it's no longer an issue. And I heard him. I thought there were some good things that could come of that, which is essentially not allowing whatever it is that you're feeling to fester, but instead going to the person or perhaps even a group of people and addressing the problem. And in addressing it, not just addressing it with like blame or I'm just mad, like with emotions, but with intention to actually create something new from this, to create a solution, to create perhaps a new practice between the two. But when addressing conflict, bring it up first, acknowledge that it's there, hear each other out, and then determine a new course of action. That's kind of how I try and handle all of my conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say that encourage others to do it and model it yourself. Is pretty much it. And then, and if that's not enough, then create some type of space where people feel comfortable and with being vulnerable and safe, to have that conflict. And then, and additionally, if that's not enough, then you invite others to assist. So try to do it directly. If that's not the case, try to create an environment. That's not the case, then ask community for assistance. But I think one of the main things is people need to reinvent what conflict means to them in their minds. Because honestly, that's where the greatest potential for growth and transformation will come throughout the work for you and the relationship. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And also, I mean, know yourself a little bit, and I say that in regards to how do you deal with conflict? How do you process? Are you a person who needs to process for some time, or are you a person who wants to talk about it immediately? How can you meet the other person halfway? I remember having a friend who, she is the person who needs some time, and I used to be the person who felt like I needed to talk about it because if I care, I care so much. I want to address it now. I got to get it off my chest now, and that's not always the way, right? Because what comes of that? Sometimes folks are defensive. um it doesn't go over well. So how can we meet each other in the middle? And sometimes that takes, knowing yourself. But once you figure that out, definitely engage in the conversation, address it if you can, talk about it one on one. But approach the conversation with the resolve in mind. We're gonna get through this because we need to, because we are in community together, and whatever it is that we're doing and how we're building is greater than us, and it is greater than this issue that we are dealing with. And I think when you approach it with that mindset, and approaching it with the mindset to listen and to understand rather than to be understood,
Mhm.
then your heart is a little bit more softened, and you're able to really truly get to the root of where the other person is coming from. So it's a process, but again, you got to show up. You got to show up. So before we end, we're going to talk about how you guys can get involved with what Kepler has going on. And I just want to say I appreciate, this invite for us to come here and talk about social capital. It's not a relation. I mean, it's not a conversation that happens often, but should happen more. I would love to see it happen in all kinds of spaces because at the end of the day, we need community, man. We need each other. This is how we sustain. This is how we survive. This is how we continue to grow and build and thrive. It is through relationship. So, did you guys have anything else to add? Any last minute thoughts?
Like check out Kepra.org, and it's KAPPRW.org. We can drop that in the chat. We got a lot of things going on around entrepreneurship, economy, housing, environment, food, technology, community conversation, education. We got a lot going on, and it's all tied to creating a new model for the future that are really about community and creating different ways to disperse decision making and resources.
Yep. Mimi dropped the links in the chat, Kepler.org, alchemyki.org. That's how you can find more about um, alchemy and the entrepreneurship, the incubator. Yeah, get active with all the things. There are plenty. And if you want to donate, kepra.org/donate/give. Hey man, go ahead and go on
Yes.
there. Yeah, man. But we appreciate you guys so much for inviting us. Albany, did you have any last words, last thoughts?
I was just gonna throw out a couple of things that I know that are going on.
Yeah.
Democratizing our data through alchemy. Those are the two big things that I just want to push out there for you all. We do have the community controlled food initiative as well. Every second Saturday, you can pick up something. Every first Saturday, you can order a package, or you can, that thing go monthly, swing by every month.
Mhm.
So, just a few of those things that were going on that I totally recommend. It's up to us as a community to care for one another in our communities. So
Yeah, man. Text somebody, hit somebody up and see how they're doing. For real, for real. Start there. Thank you guys for having us. We appreciate it. Much peace, much light, man.
All righty.
That's it. That's all. We'll talk to y'all later. Thank y'all.
thank y'all.
Thank
All righty.